Have you ever felt invisible? Like no matter what you do, people only notice you when they need something. Have you ever tried so hard to win someone's attention, only to feel exhausted and unappreciated? I know that feeling. It's frustrating, isn't it? That constant need to prove yourself, to be seen, to be valued. But what if I told you that the key to being noticed isn't in running after others? It's in becoming someone they naturally gravitate toward. Think about nature for a moment. A river never asks the mountain for directions, yet it finds its way to the ocean. The sun does not plead with the sky to embrace it, yet it rises every morning without fail. A tree does not beg birds to rest upon its branches, yet they come seeking shelter. Why? Because these elements of nature simply exist in their true essence. They do not chase, they become. And in becoming, they attract. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the one who clings suffers, while the one who lets go finds freedom. The moment you beg for attention, you place yourself beneath others, making your worth dependent on their approval. True power does not come from seeking, it comes from being. And when you cultivate your inner self, the world will turn to you, without you having to ask. There's a story I want to share with you. It's about a restless merchant, a man who had everything: wealth, influence, prestige. But somehow he still felt invisible. No matter how much he gave, no matter how much he tried to impress, people only seemed to care when they needed something from him. Then, one day, he heard about a silent monk who lived high up in the mountains, someone who spoke not a single word, yet people traveled from all over just to be in his presence. Curious and desperate for answers, the merchant set off on a journey that would change his life forever. This story is not just about the merchant, it's about all of us. We've all been in his shoes at some point, wondering why our efforts go unnoticed, while others seem to effortlessly draw people in. But the answer isn't in doing more, it's in being more. As we go on this journey together, I want you to think about a time when you felt like you were chasing people's attention. How did it make you feel? And what if, instead of chasing, you focused on becoming someone whose presence alone draws others in, whose inner peace and confidence make people want to be near them? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt like you had to prove your worth to others? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this message resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can continue exploring these lessons together. Now, let's dive into the story of the silent monk and the restless merchant. I think you'll find something in it that speaks to you. The merchant who sought attention. In a bustling city filled with traders, craftsmen, and noblemen, there lived a wealthy merchant named Elias. His name was known in every marketplace, his influence stretched far and wide, and yet despite all of his success, Elias felt empty. His days were filled with business deals and grand feasts, yet at night he lay awake, troubled by an unsettling thought. People only seemed to care about him when they needed something. Elias had everything one could ever desire: gold, luxurious, silk, a grand estate in the heart of the city, and a fleet of caravans carrying his goods across distant lands. His wealth was the envy of many, and his reputation made him a respected figure among traders. Yet for all his riches, he was plagued by a sense of loneliness. No matter how much he gave, no matter how many lavish parties he threw, the warmth of genuine companionship eluded him. At every grand banquet he hosted, his halls were filled with laughter and music. The most influential people in town attended, praising his generosity and feasting on the delicacies he provided. But as soon as the last sip of wine was consumed and the final song faded into silence, his guests vanished into the night. No one lingered. No one stayed simply for his company. Elias realized with each passing day that his friendships were as fleeting as the festivities he orchestrated. He tried harder. He adorned himself in the finest garments, commissioning exotic fabrics from distant lands, hoping that admiration would translate into affection. He lavished his so-called friends with expensive gifts, golden trinkets, rare spices, exquisite jewelry, but their gratitude was always short-lived. Their praise felt hollow, their smiles forced. And when he found himself in moments of vulnerability, seeking a sincere conversation or a comforting word, there was no one there to listen. Despite his best efforts, Elias could not shake the aching, void within him. He was surrounded by people, yet he felt utterly alone. He would walk through the streets of the city, where merchants and townsfolk would bow respectfully, their words dripping with politeness. Yet he saw it in their eyes. An expectation, a transaction, a calculated courtesy, rather than heartfelt connection. One evening, as he sat on the grand balcony of his estate, he overheard two of his servants whispering in the courtyard below. They spoke of a silent monk who lived atop a distant mountain, a man who had no riches, no status, and yet kings, scholars, and common folk alike sought his presence. They claimed he never spoke a single word, yet people traveled for miles just to sit in his company. The monk exuded something rare, something profound, a presence so powerful that people were drawn to him without him ever asking. Elias was intrigued. How could a man with nothing be sought after by everyone? How could he, a merchant of great wealth and status, still feel invisible? The thought consumed him. He could not rest. Determined to find the answer, Elias resolved to make the arduous journey himself. He gathered provisions, summoned his most trusted servant, and set off toward the mountains. The road was rough, the climb steep, and with each step, the clamor of the city faded into the silence of nature. The higher he ascended, the more he became aware of his own thoughts, unmasked by the absence of distractions. For the first time in his life, Elias was alone, not just physically, but truly alone with himself. Without the echoes of admiration or the weight of expectations, he found himself confronting the very thing he had been avoiding all along, his own emptiness. As he reached the monastery at the peak, a young disciple greeted him and led him to an ancient tree where the silent monk sat in deep meditation. Elias, impatient as ever, stepped forward and blurted out, "Tell me, wise one, why is it that I must constantly seek attention while you, who possess nothing, are sought after by all?" The monk did not respond. Instead, he reached for a small cup, walked to a nearby stream and filled it with water. Then, he placed the cup before Elias and returned to his meditation. Elias stared at the cup, confused. He waited for an answer, but none came. Frustration bubbled within him. "What does this mean?" he demanded. Still, the monk remained silent. And so Elias sat, watching the stillness of the water, unaware that he was already beginning to learn his first lesson. The merchant who sought attention. The climb was harder than Elias had anticipated. His fine silk robes, tailored for grand feasts and city strolls, were ill-suited for the rugged mountain path. The crisp air was thin, and each step felt heavier than the last. His servant, weary but steadfast, urged him to turn back, but Elias was determined. He had to meet the monk. He had to understand why people from all walks of life sought him out without him ever asking. By the time Elias reached the peak, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the monastery courtyard. The walls were simple, made of stone worn smooth by time. There were no grand gates, no guards, no symbols of power or wealth, just an open space where a handful of monks moved about in silent purpose. The air was filled with stillness, something Elias was unaccustomed to. It unsettled him. A young monk approached and, without a word, gestured for Elias to follow. They walked through a quiet garden where birds rested on branches and a small stream trickled over smooth stones. At the heart of the garden, beneath an ancient tree, sat the silent monk. Elias studied him. The man was older than he had expected, his face lined with years of contemplation. His robes were plain, his posture relaxed yet firm, as if he were rooted into the very earth. He did not acknowledge Elias's arrival, nor did he open his eyes. Frustrated by the lack of formal reception, Elias cleared his throat. "I have traveled far to see you," he said. "I am a man of wealth and influence, yet I am invisible to those around me unless I offer them something. But you, without riches, without words, are sought after by all. Tell me, what is your secret?" The monk did not answer. Instead, he reached for a small wooden cup beside him. Rising slowly, he walked toward a nearby stream, scooped up some water, and placed the cup in front of Elias. Then he sat back down and resumed his meditation. Elias stared at the cup. The water inside was clear, still, unshaken by the monk's movements. He frowned. "What does this mean?" he asked. "Are you mocking me?" The monk remained silent. Minutes passed, then an hour. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and the gentle hum of the evening settled in. Elias, despite himself, found his breathing slowing, his thoughts quieting. He looked again at the cup. The water had not asked to be noticed, yet it reflected the sky. It did not chase the birds, yet they came to drink. It did not seek admiration, yet it was essential to life. A realization dawned upon him, slow but undeniable. All his life, he had been chasing validation, believing that attention was something to be earned through grand gestures and wealth. But the monk, like the cup of water, simply was. He did not seek, and yet people sought him. Elias felt something within him shift, a small but profound crack in the foundation of his beliefs. He did not yet have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, he felt no urge to fill the silence with words. The monk opened his eyes as if sensing the change within him and offered the faintest of smiles. Then, once more, he closed his eyes and returned to stillness. Elias sat there for a long time, watching the water, listening to the quiet, and letting the lessons settle deep within him, mastering the art of presence. As Elias sat before the silent monk, he could not help but stare at the simple wooden cup of water placed before him. At first it seemed like nothing more than a meaningless gesture, but as the minutes passed in stillness, he began to notice something profound. The water inside the cup was still, yet it reflected the vast sky above. It did not move, yet it held clarity. It did not call out for attention, yet it was vital to all life. The monk's lesson became clear. Presence is like the water in the cup. It does not seek recognition, yet it is deeply impactful. In a world full of noise, distractions, and constant movement, true presence is rare, and because it is rare, it is powerful. The power of presence. When you are truly present, you bring an energy that others naturally gravitate toward. People are drawn to those who give their full attention, who listen deeply, and who engage with sincerity. Presence does not demand, it simply exists, and in existing fully, it transforms everything around it. Many of us spend our days lost in thought, preoccupied with the past, or anxious about the future. Rarely do we fully experience the present moment. But when we do, we find that life becomes richer, relationships deepen, and our sense of clarity sharpens. Presence allows us to break free from the endless cycle of overthinking and step into a place of true connection with ourselves, with others, and with the world. The modern world's struggle with presence. In today's fast-paced world, presence is increasingly rare. We live in an age where distractions are constant. Our phones buzz with notifications, our minds race with worries about what's next, and our conversations are often half-hearted as we mentally drift elsewhere. Think about the last time you were in a conversation where the other person was fully present with you. They weren't looking at their phone, they weren't distracted, they were engaged, listening with genuine interest. How did that feel? Now compare it to a conversation where someone was only half listening, their attention divided. Which experience left a lasting impact? True presence is a gift. It tells people that they matter, that they are heard, and that they are valued. It creates trust, deepens relationships, and enhances our overall sense of peace. Yet so many of us are stuck in autopilot, rarely stopping to simply be in the moment. Cultivating presence in daily life presence is not something that happens by accident. It is a practice. Just as the monks in the monastery move through their daily tasks with calm and intention, we too can train ourselves to become more present in our lives. One way to begin is by simply observing without reacting. The next time you find yourself in a conversation, take a breath before responding. Allow yourself to listen without formulating a reply in your mind. When you pause, you create space for a deeper connection to form. Another practice is mindfulness in daily activities. Try drinking a cup of tea or coffee without distractions. Feel the warmth of the cup, notice the aroma, take slow sips, and fully experience the moment. Or go for a walk without headphones, paying attention to each step and the sounds around you. These simple acts train your mind to remain in the now. In conversations, try listening with your whole being. Instead of thinking about what you will say next, focus entirely on the speaker. Notice their tone, their expressions, their words. Let your response come naturally, shaped by true understanding rather than anticipation. Setting boundaries with technology can also help. Phones and devices constantly pull us away from the present. Consider keeping your phone away during meals, silencing unnecessary notifications, or designating tech-free times throughout the day. By disconnecting from distractions, you allow yourself to reconnect with what truly matters. And when you feel overwhelmed or caught in distraction, bring yourself back with a deep breath. Feel the air enter your lungs, grounding you in the present. Even a few seconds of mindful breathing can help reset your focus and bring you back to the moment. The impact of presence. Elias realized that the monk's presence alone was enough to create a sense of peace and wisdom. He did not have to speak, nor did he have to command attention. His stillness, his calmness, and his engagement with the present moment did all the work for him. When we cultivate presence, we too become like the still water in the cup, calm, clear. We no longer feel the need to chase attention because our presence itself becomes the force that draws others in. As Elias sat in silence, he felt something shift within him. For the first time in a long time, he was not thinking about his business, his reputation, or what others thought of him. He was simply there, in that moment, fully alive, and in that presence, he found something he had been searching for all along: peace, the strength of self-sufficiency. One morning, Elias watched as the silent monk walked to the monastery garden, carrying a small pouch of seeds. The monk knelt by the stone pathway and scattered the seeds into the open air. Moments later, birds appeared, fluttering down to peck at the scattered grains. They landed gently, taking what they needed before soaring back into the sky. Then the monk did something different. He took another handful of seeds and clenched them tightly in his fist. The birds circled above, but hesitated. They sensed his grasp, the tension, the unwillingness to let go. Eventually they flew away, uninterested in struggling for something that was being withheld. Elias understood. When you offer freely, without expectation, people naturally come to you. But when you clutch too tightly, seeking to hold on to admiration, approval, or love, it slips away like sand through your fingers. Seeking attention versus naturally attracting. In all his life, Elias had chased recognition. He had given lavish gifts, hosted extravagant feasts, and showered others with favors, hoping they would appreciate him. But the more he sought approval, the less genuine their attention felt. There was a heaviness in constantly needing to prove his worth. He saw the same pattern in the world beyond the monastery. People who constantly seek validation often create pressure, making others feel obligated rather than inspired. There's an energy of neediness that weighs down interactions. In contrast, those who are truly at peace with themselves, who do not seek approval but simply live with quiet confidence, are naturally respected and admired. The monk's lesson was clear. The more you demand attention, the less valuable it becomes. True admiration is not chaste. It is earned through presence, integrity, and the quiet assurance of knowing who you are. The reality of feeling. Forgotten Elias thought of the elderly back in his city, especially those who once held power and influence but now felt invisible. Many grandparents longed for their children and grandchildren to visit more often. Some expressed frustration or sadness, wondering why they were no longer a priority. In their loneliness, they clung to memories of being needed, of being sought after. But he also recalled others, elders who lived contentedly, who found joy in simple pleasures, who did not demand attention, but instead radiated warmth and wisdom. These were the ones whom people visited willingly, drawn to their peace rather than guilted into their presence. The difference was clear. Those who release their grip on external validation, who live fully and find happiness within, naturally attract others. People are drawn to those who exude a quiet strength, not those who grasp desperately at fading attention. Living without the need for constant approval, Elias began to reflect on his own life. He saw how much of his energy had been spent trying to ensure he was seen, acknowledged, and admired. But what if he let go? What if he stopped trying to control how others viewed him and instead focused on being his best self? The monk's lesson wasn't about shutting people out. It was about self-sufficiency, about knowing that your worth is not dependent on external approval. When you cultivate peace within yourself, others naturally feel at ease around you. He began to practice this in small ways. He no longer filled silences with unnecessary words to prove his knowledge. He stopped giving gifts with the hidden expectation of gratitude. Instead, he offered what he could freely, without attachment, just as the monk had scattered the seeds without demanding the birds stay. Applying this lesson to everyday life, letting go of the need for validation is not about isolating oneself. It is about shifting focus inward. Instead of trying to control how others perceive you, nurture what truly makes you whole. Rather than seeking control over relationships, allow them to flow naturally. When you try to force affection, admiration, or recognition, it often pushes people away. Give space for genuine connections to develop. Instead of constantly looking outward for affirmation, focus on developing your own values and sense of self-worth. Find meaning in your passions, your work, your acts of kindness, things that remain fulfilling regardless of whether anyone applauds them. Make time for your own well-being, whether it is through meditation, learning something new, or simply enjoying a moment of stillness. Prioritize what brings you peace. The stronger your inner world, the less you will need from the outside world. The strength in letting go. Elias sat beneath the monastery's great tree, watching as a bird landed beside him. It did not hesitate. It did not fear him. It simply came, because it felt safe. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt no need to hold on to the moment. He let it be. And in doing so, he finally understood. The less you need to grasp, the more life flows to you effortlessly. Becoming the source of light as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias and the silent monk stood side by side, watching the first stars emerge in the darkening sky. The monk, still without words, slowly raised his hand and pointed upward. Elias, followed his gaze, watching as the stars began to appear, twinkling effortlessly in the vast expanse above them. In that moment, he understood. The stars did not beg to be seen. The sun did not chase the sky for acknowledgement. They simply shone, and in doing so they illuminated everything around them. The power of being, not seeking, Elias had spent much of his life chasing wealth, chasing validation, chasing admiration. But the monk's gesture was a reminder that true influence does not come from asking others to see you. It comes from embodying something so powerful, so undeniable, that people cannot help but take notice. When you stop running after recognition, and instead focus on becoming a better version of yourself, the right people and opportunities will naturally find their way to you. The need to prove yourself fades, and in its place, a quiet magnetic confidence emerges. He thought of the wise men in his city, those whose words carried weight, not because they spoke the loudest, but because they lived with depth and integrity. He realized that those who truly inspire others do not seek to be admired. They simply live in alignment with their highest values, and that alone is enough. The quiet strength of inner light. There is something deeply attractive about people who cultivate their own wisdom, peace, and strength rather than seeking validation from the world. They do not need to boast of their accomplishments because their presence alone speaks volumes. Their energy, their confidence, their knowledge, all of it draws others in naturally. Think of a great teacher or mentor you admire. Chances are, they did not demand respect. Instead, their quiet certainty, their dedication to growth, and their unwavering authenticity made them someone others sought out. The lesson was clear. Instead of seeking the light from others, become a light yourself. Living in alignment with your true self, Elias reflected on the countless times he had tried to impress others, shaping his words and actions based on what he thought they wanted to hear. He realized now how exhausting that had been. The silent monk had never done any of that. He simply lived with presence and wisdom, and people came to him of their own accord. True radiance does not require self-promotion. When you dedicate yourself to your values, to learning, to growing, and to simply being present, your light becomes undeniable. Rather than seeking to be noticed, focus on deepening your knowledge. Rather than trying to prove your worth, cultivate a sense of inner peace. Rather than longing for admiration, build a life that you are genuinely proud of. These things will make you shine in a way that requires no words. Applying this wisdom to your life. There is no need to announce your strengths, just live them. Walk with confidence, not because you seek validation, but because you have built something real within yourself. Work on developing your intellect, your skills, and your inner peace. Knowledge and wisdom are deeply attractive, and those who dedicate themselves to understanding and learning naturally draw others in. Peace is equally magnetic. When you are calm, when you are grounded, people will seek your presence not for what you can give them, but for the simple peace they feel when they are around you. True power does not come from demanding attention. It comes from being a person worth noticing. The light that needs no recognition. Elias looked at the stars once more and let out a deep breath. For the first time, he did not feel the need to chase anything. He simply stood in the moment, absorbing its quiet beauty. And just like that, he realized he had found what he had been seeking all along, not the admiration of others, but the kind of presence that needed no validation at all. As Elias prepared to leave the monastery, he felt lighter than he had in years. He had come seeking a secret to winning attention, but what he had found was far more valuable, the secret to no longer needing it. He realized that true transformation does not come from external validation, but from internal growth. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. When you stop seeking, you start becoming. And when you become, the world will come to you. Not because you asked, but because you are now someone worth seeking. Walking down the mountain, Elias noticed the world around him with new eyes. The rustling of the trees, the gentle whistle of the wind, the chirping of birds. Everything felt alive, as if it had been waiting for him to notice. The world had not changed, but he had. He no longer carried the weight of expectation, nor the need to prove himself to others. He understood that his worth was never tied to how many people sought his presence, but rather to how deeply he knew himself. And so I ask you, where are you in your journey? Have you been chasing after approval, longing for recognition? Perhaps it is time to pause, to be present, and to trust in your own self-worth. Let go of the need to seek attention, and instead cultivate the qualities that will naturally draw people to you. Take a moment to reflect. Are you constantly seeking validation from others? Do you feel exhausted from trying to impress those around you? What would it look like to step into your own power and let go of the need for external approval? The most magnetic people are not the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who have cultivated peace and confidence within themselves. They do not need to beg for attention, because they radiate something that others are drawn to. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to reflect and share your thoughts. What part of Elias's journey spoke to you the most? Leave a comment below, and let's start a conversation. And if you found this message valuable, consider sharing it with others who may need it. Remember, you are already enough. Be present, be whole, and let the world come to you.